Hello everyone, Mr. John here from Areteem Institute with this week's Thursday Tidbit, continuing search and exploration from last week. We did introduce this with the idea of open world games and exploration, but let's remind ourselves of some of the ideas we touched on and talked about. This systematic exploration of a map or grid, this would be more formally called a tree if we're talking about computer science terms, right? Where we have the different trees, or a graph maybe, where we have nodes and different connections for those nodes there, right? This is what's referred to as search. So this is the systematic exploration like this. Now, we talked about two common methods. These can be algorithms, depth first search, where the idea is you're kind of exploring down, breadth first search, where you're kind of exploring close areas as well. Right, so these things can be more formalized when you're talking about an algorithm, but they can be just understood with the general principles there if we're talking about humans applying these algorithms in those ways, right? So as mentioned, think about depth first search as exploring as far down as possible, right? A person starts going in one direction, they continue going, exploring in that direction, whereas breadth first search is more of a systematic close areas first, right? So both of these will eventually find everything. There's not one of these that works and one of these that doesn't. But right, these are the two common ways you learn in computer science, at least as far as algorithms are concerned. So we were thinking about this then in this expanded grid where it expands and then comes back together at the bottom. So as a review, one of the questions was, how does depth first search or breadth first search explore this grid, this tree diagram if you like? And how do these things affect maybe a game design perspective if you're doing a map or something like that there and players are exploring what could happen, good, bad, and how might you fix some of these things, right? Of course, these things are more complicated, but let's look at some simple examples and some simple fixes you might apply in this case. So, first of all, just a quick exploration of the two searches again. So let's do this a little bit less numbery than last time and just draw the picture more about how someone might explore on this map. So depth first search, the idea is go as deep as possible. And the algorithm way is going left and then right as only when you need to. So a depth first search would explore to the left here, right? Now left is fully explored. So it kind of goes all the way down to the left here first. And then we'd kind of keep going right, right? Here's where we're saying down as much as possible there. Now for depth first search, you would go backtracking a little bit here up to this point, and then you kind of circle around and go down again. So the depth first search, right, is kind of doing these loops of coming up, then backtracking and going back down, coming up, backtracking and going down there. So depth first search is kind of this windy road, but always going these kind of farthest positions away from the start as much as possible at the beginning. So how would this compare to a breadth first search approach? Right, and so this one's maybe a little bit weird, but let's still see the algorithm in action here. So you would explore to the left, then you would come back and go to the right, and then you can go to the left, and then kind of you're continuing along these ways there. So the idea is you are continuing to explore all of these nodes, the closest ones first, right? If we're going to talk about how the backtracking exactly occurs, or if that makes sense really in terms of a person exploring a map, that's okay, but this is the general idea there. You start at the top, you're kind of exploring row by row in a sense for this breadth first search. Now, how does some of this stuff relate to a game design perspective? Or what are some things you might need to keep in mind there? Right? The weird thing, or kind of the complicating thing, if we're talking about a game design perspective, is this top node might be our start. So we have our start point there, right? And then this bottom node might be our end, right? So naturally we have our start at the top, end at the bottom in this case. So what are some problems or worries we might have there? Well, thinking about the depth first search as the first one we have here, well, in that case, that person is exploring down to the left, and then they go down to the bottom, and then in fact, they reached the end there. They would be done, right? So this person skipped all of this portion on the left-hand side, right? They missed all of this there. So you might be kind of wondering, well, is that player ready to end the game? Have they seen enough of this? Are there stuff that they missed or things like that there? Right? Of course, you might not want them to see everything. We'll talk about that with the breadth first search in just a minute. But, right, did they see enough? Do they need to explore more before they're ready? Or are there other things you want to make sure they see in the game? Things like that are questions you might ask. So depth first search might be, in a sense, they're finishing too quickly. They got to the end too quick. Breadth first, as alluded to, might be the opposite, right? So you might say, okay, a person is exploring here and they're going through the game, right? We're exploring all this stuff, we're exploring all this stuff, we're exploring all this stuff here, right? Maybe they get to this point and, right, then you could say they are bored. So there could be a problem, maybe not, but in many scenarios, right, a person might not have time or interest to explore 100% of the game, but they still might find themselves exploring, worried about missing something. They don't want to have to backtrack later, so they're going to systematically explore. But, right, contrary to that, they could still be bored along the way. So that from a game design perspective, you might have to be worried about, right, can we ensure that they're seeing exciting stuff? Do we want them to explore everything? Things like that along the way. Now, two quick things, and in terms of how you could maybe fix or help alleviate some of these problems. These are no mean simple fixes or, right, things that work in every scenario, but I want to just have at least a tiny thought on what you could do or some game design things that could come into play. Now, I'm stealing this wording not quite in the same context from a game design YouTuber, and I'll say them in just a second, but for depth first search, right, our problem was the person is getting to the end too quickly. So in this scenario, you might introduce something like a lock. So the person's exploring here, they get to the end, but they reach a locked door, right? So here we have these red locks or something, and so now they are stuck in that case there. So if you want to incentivize them to explore a little bit more, right, they of course might need a key to open that lock. So now the person is stuck and they have to go looking for that key before they can get to the end. So this is kind of for the depth first search, they would be exploring a lot, and you could, as an extra question, see what would happen if we had these red locks there for the depth first search. But this is one approach we could have there. So if you're interested more in these game design perspectives, this terminology of lock and key is taken from this YouTuber Game Maker's Toolkit. I'll put the link in below. They specifically talk about this in terms of Metroidvanias and things like that there. But I like this as an idea of, okay, they progress quickly, but now we want to force them to backtrack, and we can do this with a lock and key system in this way. For the breadth first search, again, the strategy is going to be similar. We can force paths a little bit along the way, right? So this can be something that probably actually is happening, right? In our idealized exploration, it's not just this huge open plain or something in that case. We might have these quote unquote forced paths for a player. So for example, what if we get rid of just this node even at the top, right? So if we just even X out that one node there, so we have some kind of locks that are always locked in this case for that player, right? Now, instead of this full, they can explore wherever they want, we force the player to make this choice at the beginning, right? Do I want to go left or do I want to go right? Right, so the algorithm might go left or something, but right, those two ways kind of propel them forward a little bit. Now, of course, the player could backtrack and then say, I want to go the other direction, right? But we kind of push them forward to these progress points in this way. You could add more of a maze-like structure, or sometimes you could put a kind of trap door in some sense, where once they go one direction, they can't backtrack. So you might jump off a cliff and then you're stuck that way. So you can push players and force them to explore if you're worried about them kind of not making progress, not getting to maybe more exciting parts of the game as well. Now, in ending this video, I do want to point out that a lot of these things do have applications in other scenarios too, right? We've been talking about them with simple video game, open world exploration type things, but these same search ideas, algorithms are used for GPS, your phones for directions, Google Maps, Apple Maps. This is how search engines like Google or Bing or DuckDuckGo would search for websites, right? You kind of branch out, you search the website. Do you go to all the websites, their homepage first, or do you pick a website and explore that whole website? That's all of these depth first versus breadth first ideas. And any type of decision making in AI, behind the scenes, they're doing some of these search type of things. As a simple example, like chess, if you have an AI for playing chess, you're obviously searching through the possible moves in that case. But that nomenclature, that vocabulary, is actually used for other things. If you have an AI that is trying to recognize an object, right, there would be decisions and search, right? Does this look like an apple? Does this look like an orange? Does this look like a banana? And so you're doing a search that way as well. So there's many, many different applications for search outside of video games as well. So thank you all for watching this video. If you liked the video, please subscribe, give it a like, comment if you have ideas on new topics or ideas for future videos. Otherwise, thank you for watching and I will see you next time. Goodbye.